I think in the next 5 years, Boise State is going to come back onto the national stage as the group of five team.
What is up, everybody? It is Jake with Master of Football, back at it again. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for being here. Never been here before. This is Jake with Master of Football. Pro football, college football, video game football, anything related to American football, we discuss in the show right now. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'd really appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, guys, we got a special one today. Okay, so again, I have not done very many of these, but again, this is my first one. This is my first interview I've done here. We are interviewing Jacob Bleymaier, a.k.a. Bronco Bleymaier, and his channel. He covers all things Boise State and everything like that. We're going to cover a couple different things here. We're going to cover the new Boise State Athletics Master Villas they're talking about, talk about the current state of Boise State, athletics and more, talk about the possibility of Boise State to the Big 12. We'll talk about all that and more. Here is his channel. And again, I'm going to include this link in the description here. I encourage everybody here to go check that out and subscribe to him. He makes great stuff, especially all you Bronco fans, anybody who's Mountain West fans, things like that. He covers all of college football, especially obviously has a adherence to Boise State. But I encourage everybody here who follows me to go and follow him. It's a fun one. It is a long one. I hope you guys got as much enjoyment out of this as I did. Enjoy it. I'll see you guys at the end. Jake, for everybody who doesn't know who you are, give yourselves a 30-second elevator pitch.
Absolutely. So Bronco Bleymaier, been having the channel come into my third year here. Just super passionate Boise State fan. I do Boise State football videos during the football season. I preview each of the Boise State games, 3 keys to the game, and review them as well. And then a ton of other content throughout the football season and the off season as well. It's not just Boise State. I do college football in general as well. So if you're a general college sports fan, I'm going to be having my conference by conference preview where I preview every single college football team coming into this football season. Going to have that coming out here in a couple of months. And then again, for Boise State specific fans, I'll have my I'm going to be breaking down the Boise State 2022 football season. During the offseason here, we're going to be looking at each of the position groups. I'm going to be having former players coming on. I'm prepping for my first video already. I'm going to have Carl Keever, former Boise State linebacker, coming on and talking about the Boise State linebackers and defense. And then I'll have Ryan Dinwiddie. See who else? Tyler Rassa, Derek Schumann, Dreisen, James, and a couple other guys as well. Dron Johnson as well. I think is going to be able to come on as well. So it's going to be a great series, and I'm excited about it. So again, Boise State football, college football in general, make sure you look me up. Bronco Bleymaier, the same thing on Twitter as well.
For sure. And also, for everybody who didn't know, we actually broke down Boise State's then canceled bowl game. So unfortunately, it was really cool to be able to get in there and kind of talk about it, talk about the players, talk about the strengths, weaknesses, and then it didn't even matter. And then Central Michigan went and played in the Sun Bowl, and it was like, the bowl game got canceled. It was all, hell in a handbasket kind of a situation.
Yeah, we had more fun with that bowl game than Boise State ended up having.
So. Literally, yeah. We had more fun just talking about it. For those of them who don't know, your last name is Bleymaier. Why don't you give the history of the Bleymaier name associated with Boise State football?
So obviously, Bleymaier, that's one that catches a lot of attention in Boise State, and it's not a coincidence. My uncle was, my uncle is Gene Bleymaier, and he was the athletic director at Boise State, and the blue turf was his brainchild, and I think he's largely responsible for a lot of the success Boise State currently enjoys. He really helped put Boise State on the map and bring a lot of attention to the program through a lot of his innovative solutions, not just the blue turf, but a lot of the things that he did with boosters to bring attention to the university. And I'm excited to talk about what we're going to be talking about today, because I think that ties perfectly into that same discussion right there.
Absolutely. And I think, it's one of those things where you see somebody like a successful person would do a lot of things, but they'll have one thing they did that was like their thing. And right now, I mean, the cool thing about that is any non-green turf right now across the world has to get okayed by Boise State. It's so cool that they have that, all because of, like you said, your uncle, Gene Bleymaier. Again, you follow Boise State, you watch the games, you've watched all of the athletics. And again, not just football. What's the current state of Boise State athletics as of right now in 2022 going forward?
Boise State athletics in general, of course, everyone, when they see Boise State, they think football school. That's what it has been, but not necessarily the reality, but the perception has just definitely been that. But Boise State athletics as a whole is definitely what I like to call waking up. right now. I think there's been a period here, the last 10 years or so, not a decline at all in Boise State athletics, but definitely a little bit of a plateau. The other schools have been making the headlines when it comes to football specifically, but other sports as well. But in that group of five, Boise State, while still a name that people think about, hasn't necessarily been the top one on their list. I mean, of course, Cincinnati this year last year going and winning and winning the group of five slot there and getting the college football playoffs. Or it was Houston or UCF. Those were the schools out there on the East Coast. The group of five names kind of been taken over by some of those other programs. Boise State hasn't necessarily been at the top. Well, I think that is changing. I think Boise State, with the bringing in of the new athletic director here, Jeremiah Dickey, I think he is bringing new life into Boise State's athletic programs as a whole. We saw Boise State bring in a new head football coach who's bringing in a lot of energy and excitement to the football program. Boise State basketball going through into the NCAA tournament this season, and just Boise State sports in general. He is doing a great job of highlighting what Boise State brings to the table. And if Boise State ever wants to grow into a bigger conference, they're going to need to prove that they're more than just a one sports school. So I like to say right now that looks like Boise State's athletic programs are definitely beginning to wake up, and I think we could see an explosion here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I do agree with the concept of them kind of plateauing, kind of resting on their laurels and things like that. But at the same time, you're right. Basketball program just had the best year they've ever had, and again, lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But still, everybody has to remember here that Boise State doesn't make it to the NCAA tournament. Okay, that just doesn't happen. So there's definitely growth there and things like that. But I know that people will say, "Oh, well, all you guys are going to talk about is football and basketball." Well, that's because roughly 80% of the revenue comes from football, about 10 from basketball, and then the rest comes from the other departments. But I also think that the fact that you see a couple of those schools out there, Cincinnati, I think, has been around for a long time. UCF is kind of in the same situation as Boise State, where they're a smaller school. I mean, they were only around probably since about the 1960s. Same thing with Boise State. They started off as a junior college, but they have since progressed to the point to where, I mean, UCF is a meteoric rise, big market, things like that. BSU kind of has some things holding them back, but I do like the fact that Jeremiah Dickey, former Baylor guy, comes in, big thinker, really likes to get people excited. He even said right there in the press release, we are going to go through the press release here in a couple seconds. The first step to expanding and going through a facilities revamp is getting excitement going. And again, talking about that excitement there, I mean, once the renditions came forward, what were your first thoughts of particularly Albertsons Stadium and the renditions they were showing?
Well, my first thought when I looked at all of this is that this is an incredible project, because not only is it has all the highlights, it has the big marketable items, like the stadium expansion, pushing it up to 40,000 plus seats, bringing in the north and south end zones so we don't have those weird gaps there anymore. So it's got the big flashy projects that you like to bring in boosters with, but it's also achievable, because it has all these smaller steps that while we're waiting for the money to come in, or we're waiting for the construction to be completed, or the plans to be drawn up, and the state and city boards to approve, all those longer processes that it takes for those bigger projects, we have the smaller steps that this plan entails that also hit back with those other athletic programs that we were talking about, and bringing eyes and focus and energy to those other athletic programs as well. And when you look at this plan that Boise State's put together, you see the big ticket items that are going to attract the attention, but you also see smaller items that can be done quickly, that can bring media coverage to Boise State and build a sense of momentum. Too often we see with these big plans where the new athletic director comes in and he says, all right, we're going to do this massive project, and it just gets put on the back burner and it never gets done, and there's no small steps that can build excitement within the community. And that is not what Jeremiah Dickey is doing here. He recognizes that we need the big goals, but we also need the small steps to get there. And I think that this project that he's put together accomplishes that. So I'm incredibly excited to see what he's able to do with this.
Yeah, I am too. And I think, like you said there before, where it's like, oh, they'll talk a big game, but then they'll not actually do it. And I think that the thing is, you remember that, UCF had an old stadium. They created the Bounce House. Bounce House is close to the university. Again, they did not do that knowing that they were going to get the invite to the Big 12, but they showed the fact that they were trying to invest in the program, trying to build it up. I think Boise State, they're kind of like in a situation where tentatively before Dickey, they were like, well, if we get an invite, then we'll build it. But it's like, if you build it, they will come. They need to show that you're willing to invest in those sorts of things. I also think that it's another reason too. So here's a part that I think is really, really interesting. There's a name that I kept on hearing in conference realignment that when at first, utterance of it, it didn't make a lot of sense to me, but then upon inspection, it made a lot more sense. So when you check out why the fact that Colorado State was mentioned a whole bunch,
Knew
Colorado
you were gonna
State
say that.
is, and you know me, this at first I was like, this makes no sense that Colorado State's being mentioned here. You check it out, updated stadium, just took Jay Norvell from Nevada. So the fact that they're willing to invest in their program, they're willing to invest in their coaching staff, they are trying to turn around. Think about this: Colorado State has never beaten Boise State. 0-16. I think it's 0-16. They've never ever won. But again, you see the fact it's a solid education university. It's in a market that's closer to Kansas and Kansas State, so it's close to their existing infrastructure. They show their ability to invest. They really want to be good at football. It just kind of hasn't turned out the way they wanted to. I think that's where BSU needs to realize, like, yo, dude, it's great if you can go out there and get that Fiesta Bowl money, but you got to show that you're willing to invest in it and that it's important to you. And that's what's going to separate you from what we hear now, especially the talking. We're kind of hinting at the Big 12, hinting at, the next four in USF, Memphis, SMU, Boise State. They're all solid in some way, but they all have their own warts. So, and again, I see this as a great opportunity for them to kind of separate themselves if they do it.
Absolutely. And you have to show that you are building for the future. I mean, I not just me talking with other people, but you see these in articles and you see these in the discussions about why wasn't Boise State included in this last round of Big 12 expansion. Of all the group of 5 teams that has been out there at the top, and maybe not the team that's been going to those New Year's Six games the last few years, but still one of those teams that has the national recognition. Why didn't Boise State get selected? And one of the reasons that it's been mentioned that they weren't the top consideration for that is because there wasn't any growth there. I mean, Boise State, they had the success, they had the on-field success, but as far as talking about new big ticket items, I mean, I think the last big one that was put in was I know we had the video board that was put in about 8-10 years ago now in the indoor football facility, but then that's it. I mean, you had the Bleymaier Football Center that was put up, but again, all of those projects have been in place for a long time now, and nothing new has been built and expanded upon. And yet, you're right. You talk about Colorado State. They are putting in the money and the work. And Boise State, if they're not careful, they're going to get sidestepped again if they don't start putting in the money and the work as well, because nobody cares necessarily about what you've done in the past, what you're pushing towards for the future. And that's why I love what Jeremiah Dickey comes in and brings this energy. I mean, I have never seen, it's been a while since I've seen an athletic director work this hard to connect with the community. I mean, this guy will be on Twitter and someone will tweet at him saying, hey, I didn't get my ticket or something like this, some small problem that you wouldn't think an athletic director would even talk about. And he'll reply back to them. He'll reach out to them personally. I have not seen an athletic director work this hard to engage with the community and say, hey, we are back. We are trying to build towards a better success here. I haven't seen an athletic do that in a very, very long time for Boise State. So I think the future is bright here for Boise State. I think we're going to be moving back in that right direction. But it all starts with a plan like this. Now we've got to see, can he get it? Can he build from the words and actually start doing it?
Yeah, and a couple days before, and again, we were talking here about the fact this announcement, a couple days before this announcement, they had mentioned that Melaleuca out in Eastern Idaho had donated a couple $1 million for the South End Zone video board. I sit in the South End Zone. I'm not going to be able to enjoy it, so that's unfortunate. But it's the fact that it sounds like that thing doesn't just happen. I mean, Melaleuca, obviously, they probably do donate out of the goodness of their heart and for the tax benefits. But in addition to that, I mean, I think the fact that we also don't know what happened behind the scenes there. Is Jeremiah Dickey sourcing people? Hey, we want to do this. Hey, we want to do that. Because again, this all happened about the same time. Maybe those Melaleuca people had kind of an indication like, oh, this is big. This is kind of coming up. So we're seeing this screen right now, and we see the fact that these renderings, and these look so cool. So for everybody who doesn't understand this before, right now, this is the north end zone. The south end zone's just down here. We see the fact they're going to fill these in. We also see the fact, I actually think one of the coolest things was this. What was your impression of these like luxury boxes they're creating?
Yes. So right now, Boise State doesn't really have you look at some of these other small universities. I was out at the Liberty versus UAB game in South Alabama Stadium. Sorry. And yeah, I was at South Alabama Stadium, small school, and they have an amazing little snack luxury area there for their bigger ticket item, their bigger ticket donors to go and enjoy the football game. And Boise State doesn't really have that. They have up in the top near the press box, they do have some bigger ticket items.
They have a couple,
but nothing
yeah.
like this. Right. Yeah, exactly. They don't have a pavilion area like this where you can kind of be closer to the action and enjoy it. This is incredible. This, of everything that I saw that Boise State was suggesting, this is what got me the most excited.
Yeah, I mean, well, for me, what got me most excited personally was the fact that it was getting to that 40K threshold. You see Houston Stadium's 40K, the bounce house for UCF was 40K. Surprisingly, Baylor Stadium, their brand new, beautiful gazillion-dollar stadium's only 45K. This is a realistic move in order to hit that threshold to be able to get up to that new, level. I also think too that there's a sleeping giant in terms of this north end zone here. If they were to actually like build this up right here and actually have it, actually the training facility right here had built-in supports under the understanding in case they wanted to expand it there too. I mean, I know that people will talk about this, but can you imagine if there was a 50,000 seat Boise State Stadium? It'd be loud.
Well, Boise State is I believe they are the biggest growing city, fastest growing city right now in the nation. They're at least in
Mhm.
the top 5. And that is definitely a possibility going in the future. But obviously, we have to start selling out the stadium we have right now. Last season, only 2 sellouts, Air Force and Oklahoma State game. But Boise State, you're right, 36,000 36,000 X something hundred seats available right now. Not even the largest in our conference. Colorado State with 42,000. Wyoming's got a bunch of seats. Hawaii's got a ton of seats. So Boise State's definitely needed to make this step up to that 40K. And definitely, I think this is the right move in the right direction. Now we just have to see if the excitement that we're building within the community is going to allow us to fill it. I think if we can start packing this out, that extension that fans have been clamoring for. I mean, you look at, they actually had plans to fill in that gap going back 20 years ago.
So speaking of, and that's what you were talking about here, the fact that this has been around since the 90s. They were trying to get an NFL team to come here for a preseason game. Wasn't able to actually happen because didn't continue. This is the north end zone. It actually stops here, that north end zone. It's almost a bleacher section. If that is able to be solidified out and create the full horseshoe and then have a north end zone section of fans too, I mean, God, that would be just incredible to see it enclosed like this. But again, like you said, they have to do what they have to sell the games now. And I know that they're doing their best. This is the last year for now. I hint everybody here for now that they're going to be playing BYU for that rivalry once BYU goes to the Big 12. So they do need to sell out those seats.
I mean, Boise State fans are probably among the most passionate fans in the nation. And even without selling out the stadium, that stadium is still loud. I mean, it's one of the loudest environments for fans. Mountain West teams talk about it all the time, coming out to play in that stadium. So can you imagine if they were to close off those end zones and there was no escape for the sound that had to reverberate back onto the field with what we have already? I mean, it is going, as soon as they put even the lower level expansion, it is going to dramatically increase what is already a very dangerous home field advantage for Boise State. I'm excited for the future here.
And again, this was what we were talking to about this rendering here. So again, look at the 48,000 here, and that wasn't with those included new luxury seats and things like that. And again, I say like those are like medium luxury seat, like you said, kind of like a commons area. But imagine you complete the horseshoe, and then you throw this up there. God, that would be just incredible to be able to see that.
Yeah, that would be amazing with the tricolors and the different Boise State designs that we have going on. Again, if Boise State, we talk about all of this. We as the fans, we want these things to happen where we kind of put a lot of the onus on the university and on the administration to kind of get these things done. But the truth of it is, I think a lot of it starts with us as fans. It starts with us doing a lot of that grassroots of engaging with the community and hey, saying, hey, you going to the game this weekend? I got an extra ticket. Come with me. Going out and engaging, because we can complain about the university not necessarily prioritizing the football program like we want them to, or about empty seats. But if we're not doing something ourselves to go out there and build that, it's never going to happen, because university can only ask. They're not going to be able to drive. We as a community have to drive. So I think that if we want to see this future, which is definitely achievable, I think that a lot of other schools are showing that blueprint for us. We have to be the ones that go out and make that happen.
For sure. And I think that the university, to give I don't want to say to give the devil his due, but to give them their due, they've done a couple different things here. So moving kickoffs to 8 p.m. I know it's not ideal, and that definitely costs a lot of people from going to games, especially you live out in Caldwell, you live out in Eagle. It's going to take an hour and a half to get home. It's midnight when it's 1:30 when the game ends. So that's a big issue there. But again, by doing that, they get a couple extra $1 million from being the exclusive person in that TV slot, So it's kind of the trade-off. But imagine if we were to be in a situation where games were at 5, Games were at 1 p.m. Imagine this. And again, look, beautiful sunny sky. I was there this last year when they played Nevada. It was a beautiful kickoff. It was gorgeous. They lost, unfortunately.
Right.
But it was one of the top 10 attended games in in their history. So I think that's another thing that we have to remember here that we always kind of forget is the fact that the kickoff times, any 8 p.m. kickoff, dude, it's tough to get a family out there,
True. It's true. But I think that with the new energy that they're putting into the stadium, with the new designs that they'll be having, I think it's going to entice a lot more people to come as well. And if we can start, if the community buys in, if the community says we're going to pack out the seats that we have, we're going to start giving you the money, the boosters start providing the money to go out and achieve these bigger projects, then maybe the conversation can be had saying, hey, we've got enough community buy-in. We don't necessarily, we can play that battle where we say, okay, we won't necessarily take that later time slot, give us more TV money because we're getting more community buy-in. And I think that's definitely a discussion that administration needs to have here, is factoring in those two things. But first off, it starts with the community showing that they're willing to put that buy-in out first.
For sure. Okay, so the next question I want to know from you is, what's your impression so far? Okay, we had 1 year. What's your impression of Brian Harsin to Andy Avalos? Brian Harsin goes to the Auburn Tigers. Has a okay year there, and again had some issues in the offseason, but we're not going to address that. We want to talk about Andy Avalos, the BSU transition with him head coach. What's your opinion of that?
So obviously it's a tough one, right? Because Andy Avalos comes in, brand new head coaching staff, offensive and defensive coordinators coaching for the first time at this level in their positions in the FCS prior to this. Andy Avalos, first time head coach, playing with all Harsin's guys pretty much, and having to bring in a completely different scheme. So it is really hard to analyze that first season and say how much of this was the coaching staff adjusting. Obviously 7-5, not a good season by Boise State standards or by college football standards in general. Is one of the worst in school history in a while. But you also look at some things that happened there with, 2 top 25 wins, a top 10 win against BYU, a win against rival Fresno State, which interestingly enough, Andy Avalos has never lost to Fresno State, neither as a player or as a coach. A win. We had that win against Oklahoma State, if not for a terrible referee.
Don't do it, man. Don't talk about it, man. Don't do it.
I know. But in my book, I count that as a win. A team that ended up in the top 10 themselves. So you look at a team that had so many ups and downs throughout the whole. I did that opposite, didn't I? But ups and downs throughout the whole season. I got you.
We know it's YouTube. They know.
Yeah, right. So many ups and downs throughout the whole season. But what I look at overall that gives me the best impression, because obviously that first year is kind of going to be a rough demo year anyway. What gives me the most hope is the change in energy that the team as a whole and even the play calling brought to the field last season. It was a do or die kind of style. And I think that a lot that kind of impacted the end result there, is as far as 7-5 and that lack of consistency. But they came in hot every single game. I have not seen the defense play with that much energy and aggression, just so much naked aggression, with not just Skinner, but throughout the whole team. Boise State was headhunting out there. And it's not something that I've seen Boise State defense do for a while. They've actually, one of the reasons I think Boise State has plateaued over the last few seasons, or over the last 5-10 years, is because that defense hasn't been the dominant upfront blue collar defense that built Boise State in the past. When you look at those Fiesta Bowl winning teams, their offenses were good, but it was their defenses that kept them in those seasons that ultimately led to them winning those games. If you can get your defense in the right place, the offense will come. So I know a lot of fans are worried about the offense right now, the lack of balance in the run and pass game, the lack of offensive line, which, to be fair, that's not Andy Avalos necessarily. I mean, the offensive line was pretty terrible under Harsin the last couple of seasons as well. So, but what I see overall as far as the transition goes is a change in mindset, a change in focus, where the energy has just spiked through the roof. And then also you look at the players that Andy Avalos is bringing in. A lot of these are local guys. He's connecting with the community in a way that Harsin was great at recruiting at a national level, but we lost a lot of top Idaho prospects under his watch. And I think it was not necessarily that he couldn't bring them in, but it wasn't necessarily the focus. Andy Avalos is bringing in guys that fit the Boise State mold. They're not necessarily all going to be 4 stars and that kind of level, but they're the guys that are going to come in and be the under-recruited Kellen Moores of the world that come in with the right attitude and can be molded into something better. So I think that that's what Boise State's bringing here at Avalos. This next season, I'm excited for. I don't think we're going to go undefeated. I think we're going to, there's going to be some growing pains. But I think coming into the third season with 2 recruiting classes under Andy Avalos' belt here, coming into the season after this, I think we're going to shock the world. So I'm excited to see what Andy Avalos can do. We plateaued for a while. We needed a little bit of a clean house and to shake it up. And he's definitely bringing something different to the table.
For sure. And I think a lot of people will forget here the fact that when they played Georgia in the Georgia Dome a couple of years ago, they're like, oh, it's Kellen Moore's senior year. They got this high-flying offense. No, it was the fact that our defensive line whipped their offensive line. That was basically the big reason behind that game and that their abilities. I think, like you said there, the fact that there was the UCF game and the Fresno State game really highlighted what this team, the ups and the downs. Because like I said, the UCF game, get out to a 21-0 lead, doing great. We're not able, and again, we saw this throughout the season, we're not able to establish a line of scrimmage on offense. The interior of the offensive line just got bullied. So you'd pass, you'd go 3 and out, you'd waste 10 seconds, they'd get the ball, they'd go down the field. And that happened several times. But then you see the fact that when Andy Avalos' impact on the defense, that Fresno State game, I was a little worried in that game, but we went down there and beat the brakes off them because he was really able to use those defensive backs, really just lock down their offense, did a really, really good job there. You could feel his impact in the game.
I think you see this a lot from not just talking about coaching, but talk about life in general. You have these high-flying, high-energy guys that come in, and they're going to have great moments. The consistency comes with time. So Andy Avalos coming in, he brings in the energy, he brings in the passion again. And you saw that some really great, I think, glimpses of what the future of Boise State can be in some of those big games, BYU, Fresno State, even at times, like you said, at the beginning of those UCF game. But then again, lacking that consistency overall, and that's just going to take time. Fans are going to have to be patient. Rome isn't built in a day. Boise State's going to take some time here to have to develop that consistency, to bring in the right players that are going to fit into this model. But I think what we're looking at is a Boise State team. When we're looking at coaches to come in and replace Brian Harsin, I think everybody wanted Kellen Moore, and I'll be honest, that was my number one choice as well, and it still would be. But when you look at what this team needed the most, the offense, was something that could be addressed, but the defense was something that had really gone downhill. I mean, 2020, Boise State had, I think it was the whole year, they had 3 or 4 turnovers. I'd have to look at the stats again. But they had like 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions. And the defense the offense was plateauing. The defense was going downhill. We needed someone to come in and fix the defense. And if we couldn't get Kellen Moore, Andy Avalos was the best hire, in my opinion.
Going forward, we've talked about, Andy Avalos. We talked about Bronco Athletics. We talked about the Athletic Master Village. Going forward, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for Boise State to continue to grow and develop as a program?
Well, I think first and foremost, and I'm going to kind of look at this as the perspective of what would it take for Boise State to reach that next level? So what is someone from the outside, primarily say a board of coaches or directors of a bigger conference, hint the Big 12, what are they looking at Boise State to bring to the table to say that's a team we'll consider bringing? And I think that it's going to take Boise State getting to a Power 5 conference to break that next mold, to reach that next level of success. So what does Boise State need to do to achieve that? Well, the first thing they need to do is they need to beat the stigmatism that they're a one sport school. It's hard to sell the school as saying, all right, just take us on football. I mean, some schools do that, but you're going to bring more to the table if you can present yourself on a multitude of athletic programs. Boise State basketball rising up was huge this year. I don't know if people realize how big that was for Boise State as a whole, to show that, yeah, maybe they didn't go and win that NCAA tournament game, but to be able to win the Mountain West outright in both the conference play and tournament play the way that they did, if they can maintain that consistency, they're going to be proving that they can bring more to the table. So that's the first thing that Boise State has to do. Football, basketball, there are other programs, building attention and focus, which this athletic master plan does. That's going to be the first thing. Second thing here is building community engagement. So Boise State, large city or growing city here. Boise State is a recognized national brand. You see a lot of excitement. Boise State is out of the group of 5 teams, they're the 4th most viewed nationally, national TV averages. They're the fourth most viewed team out of all group of 5 teams. 3 of those other schools are academy teams, and then the 4th one is Cincinnati. So, that's a pretty good place to be. when you're competing against the whole military and then a school that went to the playoffs. So Boise State has a great national following. What they're really lacking, and I see it when I come in and get to visit Boise. Obviously, I don't get to live there right now, stationed in Florida, but when I come and visit Boise, you don't see. I go to a lot of college towns, and you see the energy. When you go to Boise State, when you go to Boise City, there's not a lot of energy there for Boise State. You go around a lot of the different downtown, you go drive around a lot of different neighborhoods. You don't see just, when I lived in Oklahoma and you drove around some of those towns in Oklahoma, you would see an Oklahoma or Oklahoma State fan on every single house, on every single license plate, in every single restaurant, every single bar. You don't really see that when you go to Boise. So that's going to be the first thing, I think, is building that engagement. You see it by the fact that we're not selling out the stadiums. You see it by the fact that we're not reaching our donor goals. To be considered to join the Big 12, they're looking at 10,000 members that are boosters, part of the BAA. It doesn't take much to be a booster. $25 a month is going to get you being a booster member. Or I think there's even smaller packages than that. And we right now we're tapping out at like 4,600. So that is the biggest thing, is building that community engagement. The third thing here is finding a way for Boise State to build the community support. Boise State's a fast-growing city, but they're a fast-growing city filled with a lot of people coming from other states, California, Oregon, who already have sports teams that they're supporting. Boise State has to find a way to get those fans that are coming into Boise and say, hey, we're your team now, and find a way to connect with those new residents moving into Idaho, moving into Boise, find a way to connect with them and build excitement for them, for these new fans, this new fan potential base, because otherwise Boise State's going to end up being a stranger in its own city here with this massive community, but nobody really coming and supporting the school because they've already got their own fan bases. So they got to find a way to connect with those incoming people here. And then the last one I'll just say, and this is always for Boise State, is just beating that East Coast bias. And I think part of it is maybe working with those time slots. That 8 p.m. time slot, yeah, you bring in the money and everything, but you don't get any eyes on you at all. Nobody on the East Coast is watching you play. Nobody that matters as far as AP voters, as far as CFP voters, have any idea what's going on with Boise State. So Boise State's got to find some ways to beat that stigmatism. Maybe it's doing some marketing. Maybe it's brand recognition. I'm not saying pull UCF and claim some national championships, but do something that stirs up some media discussion about you and get some eyes on Boise State. So when you're having on-field success, people actually care and notice what's going on.
For sure. And I think another thing too, you kind of mentioned there, that it's kind of the same issue. You hear this from the University of Miami down there in South Florida. So they have this issue where the fact is the stadium they play at is not on campus. It's a huge metropolitan area. Not everybody graduated from Miami. It's a small private school. So if they're good, people show up. If they're not good, people don't show up. That's kind of the situation there. That's the thing you're kind of worried about with Boise State football. You know, that's a big thing that's going to happen. You're right. As the transient community gets in, hopefully they're going to stay. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people moving in, but they need to definitely develop that. You also mentioned too, with the basketball of this. I mean, first of all, if we talk about the basketball game, the tournament game, if they played in the second half like they should have played in the first half, they would have won. But yeah, developing those two up, developing up the fact you also saw they're throwing into the soccer stadium, they're throwing into, you know, the basketball stadium like upgrades, they're throwing into the basketball practice facility upgrades. They're really trying to invest in those things. They do need those donors and things like that. If you had to say, where do you see Boise State athletics and or football in the next 5, 10, 20 years? And again, whatever time frame you feel like, what's your opinion there?
All right, so next 5 years, and I'm going to put the contingency on this in that it depends on how much the community engages. It depends on how much you, the viewers, Boise State fans in general, how much you're going and connecting with the Blue Collar Club and connecting with their athletic support groups, or you're connecting with the BAA. I think it's going to depend on how much buy-in happens. If what I think is going to happen, if the energy that Jeremiah Dickey is generating for this program, if the energy for the Boise State football that Andy Avalos is bringing, and the potential I think he has shows true, combined with community support happens, this is what I think is going to happen. I think in the next 5 years, Boise State is going to come back onto the national stage as the group of 5 team. They're going to be the team, not Cincinnati, not UCF, not Houston, obviously all those teams leaving for the Big 12, but not some school from the East Coast, not some school from the Sun Belt or the American Athletic Conference. Boise State is going to reestablish themselves, I think, year 3 here. So in this next season, going to be a good season for Boise State football, but not necessarily one of the historic ones. I think coming into year 3 for Andy Avalos has potential to be a team where Boise State makes that question, at least taking that group of 5 slot for the New Year's Six, and maybe having some of that push and discussion about the playoffs. Not necessarily, I'm not saying they're going to go to the playoffs, but having that controversy that some of these other schools have stirred up. I think in the next 5 years, you see Boise State win at least 1 New Year's Six game, go to at least 2 New Year's Six games, and build their program overall. If the Big 12 starts to expand, I think Boise State makes that conversation, makes that discussion to get picked up by the Big 12.
So actually, and a big thing about that too, that really helps out that transition, like you said, that's off you go, 5 years, 2 appearances, 1 in the playoffs, something like that. But think about this. So the big players on that stage, UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, are all off the group of 5, slot. Same thing with BYU. So that's a big indicator there. Also, the fact that, again, they were mentioned there. I get a lot of people who, especially Boise State fans, who are kind of sour at the fact that BYU got picked over the Big 12. But in the same way that Cincinnati, a big aspect of them joining the Big 12 was the fact that they were close to West Virginia, and the fact they also had solid things too, is the fact that BYU is going to need a regional travel partner for a lot of things. I think that we slot right in there pretty well. And again, we are one of the names. Us, I think, in Memphis are the 2 most common names of the next 2. And then the next 2, it seems to be USF and it seems to be SMU. All right, so now could you go ahead and continue on with 10?
Yeah, so moving on to the 10, and I think, again, this has a lot to do with what happens with that Big 12 expansion. It has to do with college football in general. I mean, we are seeing with not just NIL, but with the expansion programs, with the idea of super conferences kicking off,
transfer portal.
The transfer portal, college football is changing in a big way. It's not, the next 10 years is going to be nothing like the last 10 years that we saw, not just for Boise State football, but for college football in general. So that is it. A lot has to depend on what happens with that. But I think that in the next 10 years, you see Boise State join a form of that new version of college football, whether that's as a, I'm not saying they're going to go independent, but they're going to be part of that. They're not going to get cut out. I think a lot of people are worried with this new, when we talk about super conferences and we're talking about the Power 5 kind of breaking off, about Boise State getting locked in the dark. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to be part of that. I think that they're going to potentially here get a jump into the Big 12. I would say in the next 10 years, talking about a decade from here, so 2032, I think that Boise State would find themselves in the whatever Power 5 conferences exist, then they find themselves somewhere in that slot. And I think that they lead for Power 5 conference there in the next 10 years. Next 20 years, this is where it gets, I think Boise State stays on this trajectory. Even when they've been plateauing, they haven't been dropping off. Boise State, they're too unique. They're too different. They've established themselves in the modern era of college football. In 20 years from now, they'll start being at a place where a lot of these modern universities that we're talking about today, or that have been in the last 20 years, Boise State's been competing about, that as far as age goes, they're going to be at that level where these schools are right now. Boise State, people forget, they've only been an FBS program since 1996. So they're coming here into do the quick math there, 26th year of FBS. I mean, that is a very young football program. In 20 years, they'll be coming into their 46th year, coming up on their 50th year of FBS eligibility. So I think that you see Boise State in a place where they're part of a Power 5 program, they're part of a school. And I'm going to make a risky prediction here, and someone can check it back on me in 20 years. I think in the next 20 years, Boise State wins a national championship.
I thought you were going to go say something like they were going to join. I actually, I'll say this, not because I'm super bullish on that opinion, but because I'm super bearish on this other opinion. I think that Boise State has a higher percentage chance of winning a national championship than they do of joining the Pac-12. So that's just because the Pac-12 is a bunch of jerks. They won't invite us in. No, but in all seriousness, basically what you've been saying the next 20 years. So you see the fact, going back through a couple of these things, I watched that 365 Sports. They have a great channel. They do a lot of analysis of how these conferences actually decide the teams they want to go with. And a big aspect they said is the fact that Boise State in the last 5 years, they've doubled their research dollars. So we might not have seen the performance on the football field that we want to necessarily expect, but we see that, I forgot what the guy's name was, but he mentioned the fact that Boise State is adopting the Notre Dame and USC strategies from the 1930s. The 1930s, what they were trying to do is they were trying to build up their football program. They take that football money, they throw it towards education. They build up the education infrastructure. They build up all that kind of stuff, because that's where BSU, I think, has the most, growth potential, is the fact that, first of all, I mean, no offense to the Idaho Vandal fans, which, I mean, whatever kind of offense to them, but they had flagship status removed from them a couple years ago. It was kind of done quietly. No, it wasn't. There wasn't a big hubbub about that. But I think the reason why is because BSU is going to be the premier institution in the state of Idaho in the next 20 years. So They're going to have all this support. It's going to be the state university. It's a reasonably central location. I mean, obviously the Panhandle is kind of isolated. Eastern Idaho, it's easy to get over here, although the I-84 is one of the worst roads in the world. But, for the most part, you see the fact that winning a national championship, that's a big aspect. But I do think the fact that this Big 12 matchup, this potential to go on from there. Also, the cool thing I like about the Big 12 is the fact that once Oklahoma and Texas left, there's no real blue blood left that can flex their muscle. I think Kansas thinks that they're that university. I think Kansas thinks that, that's why I think that Kansas thinks that they're this close to joining the Big 10. But I think that, they seem to lack that ability. I think next year, right now, it looks like that Baylor looks like they're probably going to repeat in football. They're favored, I should say, to repeat. But, OU lost a lot of players there. Texas couldn't even win in the Big 12, enjoy the SEC, so that's where they're at with a lot of those things. So I love the fact that you kind of said that, the fact that that's where this university is heading. As long as they do their due diligence, they can get to that point. Now, again, 20 years, national championship, lofty goal, but I see that if they stay on their stuff, they can get there.
I'm on some Big 12 groups as well, because I like to keep an eye on what the general population of Big 12 fans are thinking about these expansions. And I was talking about Boise State joining on one of these chat threads, and someone was saying, well, Boise State doesn't have the academics. And first off, I'm just going to say this: the Big 12 is not an academic elite conference. When you talk about what the Big 12 stands for, it's not academics. And most rankings are actually ranked last in the Power Five, and they're actually ranked behind the American Athletic Conference and a couple of those as well. So when you talk about the Big 12, they're not the Pac-12 or the Big 10 or the Ivy League. So they're not a brain trust necessarily. But yeah, they're right. Boise State doesn't have the highest academic standings, but they're also a school that's not been around for that long compared to.
They've only had out 4 years for 50 years now. They've only been out 4-year degrees for not very much time.
That's absolutely right. And in the way that it works in this modern era, you build your athletic programs, the rest of it comes with that. You get the money, you get the recognition, and the academics rise as the athletics, which is basically what you were saying as well. So Boise State's going to get there. They're going to be a school they're holding their own right now academically anyway. They're not some school where you go and you get a guaranteed, degree from the Caribbean or something like that. So they're a legitimate academic institution. And I don't think
these opinions are not of Master Football. I love my Caribbean universities. Okay, just want to make sure we're clear about that. No, but in all seriousness, like you said, the fact that and they were going back to what I was talking about before, is the analysis of several of these universities. The goals of the university seem to align a lot more with the Big 12 teams for Boise State as opposed to a Pac-12 team. These Pac-12 schools, University of Washington's been around for a gazillion years. UCLA's been around for a gazillion years. Arizona's been around for a gazillion years. West Virginia, they've been around for a while, but they have lowered their academic requirements because they're trying to educate Appalachia. That seems to be kind of their goal. So they don't necessarily fit in with the ACC. I mean, Virginia has, how many presidents that went to the University of Virginia? West Virginia would love to join the ACC, but the goals of the university, and I've actually got really involved with that in understanding, the fact that Boise State, Memphis, SMU, in USF kind of fit a little bit more in that mold. UCF's kind of the same thing, where UCF, they are going to have, 1 million alumni just because they have 60,000 students on campus right now. So, the fact that BSU is trying to invest in that area, and I think that's where once they make the football dollars, invest in the education, everything will kind of take care of itself.
Oh, and with Boise, the city expanding in the way that it's been doing, Boise, Idaho, just exploding. those people are going to have kids. They're going to have people that need to get degrees, and they're going to need a place to go to college, and they want a local spot. So that is going to continue to expand as well. So people make the argument that they're really just looking for excuses to keep Boise State out because there really aren't that many good ones. And so they look for reasons that they can look elsewhere, because Boise State's kind of established themselves as that you love them or hate them kind of. I like to tell people that Boise State's the Alabama of the West Coast, but you got people that just have these strong opinions. They hate the blue field, and they hate the idea of Boise State always trying to stand up with the big guys, and speaking out of turn and getting out of their place. So they look for reasons and excuses why they can keep Boise State out, and so the academic one comes up. But in my view, it's not a legitimate argument.
No, and you're right. I think that I will say that Lincoln Riley at USC's got a potential down there. I actually really like that pairing down there. But you're right. At the same time, every single coach, for the most part, that comes to Boise they almost all have success. It's a very, very easy place to recruit. It's a reasonably large city. It's a beautiful area. They've got a lot of things going for it. So going forward, I like your predictions and I like those things like that. Any last thoughts? What are your last thoughts about this going forward, man?
So I'm just going to do a quick pitch here because I've been mentioning it this whole time and how we build it, and it's by building up the community. So I just want to say, anybody who's not a member of Bronco Nation Updates on Facebook, we've got over 10,000 members now. We are just exploding community, Facebook community for Boise State. That is your place to connect with all your Boise State news. Make sure you're joining that as well. And then the other one here is talking about where the money's going to support this school. Join the Blue Collar Club. By my friend Joel Founder. He's created that they are directly linked, or they're linked with the BAA. So any money that you go to supporting them goes to the BAA. You get listed as a booster for the BAA, and those booster numbers are going to be key to Boise State getting an invite to the Big 12. We can get over 10,000 boosters. Boise State's going to be one of those teams that starts getting considered. So please, 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 if you want to see Boise State succeed, we can do all the talking head stuff we want. We can analyze the football program. We can talk about the sports. But in the end, it's not necessarily the on-field production that's going to get Boise State to the future. It's going to be you, Bronco Nation. So join Bronco Nation Updates, support the Blue Collar Club. That's all I'm going to say on that matter there. That's what's going to take Boise State to the next level.
All right, last thing. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
If they want to find me, like I said, I'm on Twitter, Bronco Bleymaier, so you can find me on that. I'm also involved in Bronco Nation Updates, so you can find me there on Facebook as well. If people reach out to me on Twitter, I hit them back. I've also got my own Facebook page, Bronco Point. You can hit me up there as well. Comment on any of my videos. I reply to all the comments as well. So I try to engage as much as I can with my viewers, and I'm excited to see what comes about with Boise State here in the next few years.
And Kansas fans and Caribbean University fans, go give them a follow too. Go check them out. Okay, don't take it personally. We're just analysts. We're just giving our opinions. All right, do your best out there. But hey, Jake, thank you so much for being on this channel. And you know what? I both know in the future, I'll do with you. You do with me, man.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for letting me come on here. I've enjoyed the discussion here. I know every video I'm on, in this way I'll do this one as well. Thanks so much for having me on, and go Big Blue.
You guys made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for being here. Again, I appreciate all the love. Anyways, for all of you out there, if you haven't done it yet, like, share, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. I'll see you guys tomorrow with your regularly scheduled programming. I am out.